You're the pro, buddy. You're gonna have to like carry me.
I was hoping you were going to carry me.
No.
Appreciate you joining us today, Rusty.
Thank you for having me, Branden.
I figured today it would be helpful for our listeners if they could hear a little bit about executive recruiting and really how it pertains to hospitality and retail.
When it comes to that space, prior experience is necessary. It is not a translatable accounting function to go from like a manufacturer or a law firm and then say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go work for a beverage company, or a restaurant group or whatnot. So I would say that finding those people, and it's such a small group, a tight-knit community, and, everyone knows everyone else.
No.
And so it becomes a challenge of how can you find like the newest unknown.
Right. That CFO and controller position obviously has the data understanding, the background within that hospitality space, and really plays an important role for the owner to be able to understand what's going on behind the scenes, how to read those financials, really how to translate some of that data, if you will.
No, 100%. And I think that the best advice I could give anyone looking to hire in the finance realm, know what you want. And so what is the most important thing for someone to be successful in your organization? And then making sure the other stakeholders agree. Because you definitely don't want someone who, oh, we want a red car. Oh, we want a motorcycle. And so then you end up with a battle royale.
Yeah. So it sounds like having those conversations early, being proactive is the key versus waiting till something has happened, waiting till the business is in despair, if you will, trying to then find that individual quickly. That can be a disaster sometimes. So
the team that I work with, I view us as professional matchmakers. So that's where you tell me what you want and we will go find it for you, but you've got to know.
Yes. And I think that's probably the most important piece, you would argue, is when they come to our group, come to the recruiting group, they have to have an understanding of what they want, or at least be able to articulate some of it. We can help probably pull out some other areas that they may not be thinking about, but come to the table ready to understand what it is that you're looking for.
When you are recruiting for a CFO for a hospitality group, that is far different than finding a controller, because that person has worked in the space before. They know what they like and what they don't like. And so they are going to be much more, it's a harder sell,
right,
than it is to try to find a accounting manager.
Right.
So for a CFO, what's been something that they all want to know is, can I build out my own team?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is very hard to come in as the head of the finance division when you are going to be working with people who have been there for 15, 20 years, and they are not real excited to get a new person in charge, because they were used to the way that Branden did it. And what if Rusty doesn't operate the way Branden does?
Kind of think of it like a head coaching position.
Exactly.
You've got a head coach that comes into a college and really has to start over from the ground up to revamp the culture, if you will, and to really push forward what they're looking for. And I think one of the caveats to this industry that a CFO has to understand, and that they more than likely understand since they've hit that point, is just the amount of data, that the volume of the transactions. You've got customers after customers coming in, day out. If it's at a restaurant, every table is a transaction, and that might flip 4 to 5 times a night. And then obviously during the holidays, you could have more than that. So I think understanding that data and how voluminous it can be, and really what it takes to get it to a set of financial statements that's understandable by the management team, by the stakeholders, it's going to mean so much more. And some of the metrics that come to mind are obviously food cost and labor cost. Being able to boil that down and understand what goes into that, and being able to bring that really to a meaningful standpoint of comparing it to your peers. How are they doing? How are we doing? What are some of the gaps that we can improve upon? So I think that CFO really just has to understand that volume of transactions and how to translate it to a meaningful conversation for the owner and really for the rest of the management team for that matter.
On the other side of creating a new position is you have succession planning.
Mhm.
And because believe it or not, some accountants do like to retire. And hiring in someone who can bring a fresh perspective. And they don't have to bring in, well, this is the way we did it in my old, group. So I want to do everything this way. But they can bring in a new idea. They can bring in, oh, wow, I didn't realize that if we could, you know, drop our days to close, from 14 to 7, it would actually end up saving people money. It would be saving the group money, and we can utilize AI rather than the old process of having HR interview all of our prospective servers or whatnot. There are AI platforms that can do it all for you and give you the data very quickly. But I think someone that could bring in those would be of value immediately.
I would agree, and I think we're probably seeing that more than ever before. Probably the past 5 years and maybe the next 10 years as we go through really the baby boomer cycle, if you will, and people begin to retire and think about retiring. I would encourage all the listeners to think about that next step sooner rather than later.
You
3 to
don't want
5
to
years.
you do not want to get behind the 8 ball on that.
That's right. So I think that brings up a good question as we go to our listeners and they start thinking about this. Kind of what does that timeline look like for succession? How often? How soon? Is it too soon? Is it too late? What are your thoughts there?
I think that part of the year-end planning process that not just Warren Averett, but any accounting firm walks through with their clients is going to be what is your exit strategy,
Mhm.
whether that is with the owner or whether that is with the C-suites, and knowing what is our next plan, because that to hire someone, that to get them ingrained is going to take, I would say, at least 2 years. So if you know that you want to be out, or if you want, to retire, your CFO to retire in 2028, you need to go ahead and start that process now.
That's a great
And
point.
the number one thing you need to do is look within the organization. Is there anyone that can step up and take this role? Does anyone want this role?
Mhm.
Before you go to an outside source.
And it's probably beneficial too to think about it early like that because you've got your current CFO, if you will, you've got the new hire that's there. They can learn from each other and not have this immediate light switch moment and the new CFO become overwhelmed, frustrated, whatever it may be. And then you've got this constant evolving CFO situation going on because he or she gets frustrated, they leave, and then you're out again looking for the next one. And it constantly keeps going. So
And I think that, if I were designing everything, you would bring in your successor as like a director of finance or as a, financial controller, so that they are much more of a peer to the current team. And then knowing that this is going to be what the steps are going to look like over the next 2 to 3 years. So that it's not like a surprise. Rusty's now in as the CFO, and we all know that, back to your football terminology, you're probably going to clean house.
yeah.
And so I think that it would be a better consistency to have that continuity with your staff.
That's a great point too, and you really get to build the relationship with the team members that you're ultimately going to be leading at some point in the future. So you get time to do that in a safe environment, if you will.
100%.
They don't feel threatened or like something's not right. You really get to organically build that relationship, and as you step into that next role, it just makes it so much easier and more effective for the company.